Hey, Happy New Year. This is Ashley Swartz, founder and CEO of Furious Corp. I'm here for Beet TV, as always, at CES 2016. This happened on day one this year, so obviously every year the pasty redhead has a harder time with the desert climate. I'm still going to come back next year, I promise. So let's sort of like set the stage, right? I mean, we ask ourselves every year, why has this become the second con? Like, why is this now a hub for the media industry? Is it, look, we don't talk a lot about advertising here, but the reality is that what we can uniformly agree is that what we're seeing is more devices, more consumer touch points, more data, right? More content, et cetera. And that in and of itself is important to marketers to understand and win over the hearts and minds of consumers, as well as for us to understand where advertising is going to be showing up and where it's going to be meaningful in the future. So I'm going to do my top 10 wrap, which I'm really excited about this year. It's been a great show, despite the voice. So, I mean, look, I got to start though and just be real. I mean, keeping it real, it's like Groundhog Day, right? I mean, drones, wearables, virtual reality has sort of come up big this year. It wasn't as big last year. The connected home, smart devices, Internet of Things in a roundabout way. I mean, but the reality is that what's interesting and notable about this year is that things are more mass market and more scalable. And I'm going to get a little bit more detail, but at the end of the day, the thematic isn't that much different. Number two, I'm going to lead with stuff that's really directly relevant to our industry and to media, and specifically TV, because that's so near and dear to my heart. New Slingbox UI, right? They took a page out of Netflix's book. So leads with sort of content that you've recently watched, as well as more on demand. So it's really more about SVOD, parsed content, right? But at the end of the day, they've not cracked discoverability. So it's interesting, but yeah, it falls a little bit short because no one's really figured out how to make all this massive video content and television more discoverable. Three, Netflix's keynotes, right? Or keynote rather, wow, Reed Hastings and sort of his plan for world domination. I mean, they're going, live globally in 130 countries. No live in Deutschland, but I think that's interesting because Uber still can't take off in Germany and much of Europe. But at the end of the day, their share price rose 12 points after that announcement. So I think that no matter what, the ad-free subscription VOD model, or SVOD as we call it, is working. And I think it's really notable for us in the industry that we need to stand up and pay attention to that, given the numbers we see coming out about sort of fragmentation of audiences and cannibalization of TV over to digital platforms. Number four, who cares about 4K or smart TVs? I mean, really, it's like the same old. The TVs just get bigger. Maybe they're curved, maybe they're not. It's OLED, et cetera. But at the end of the day, these stories have that interesting. And what I still keep seeing is that there's only a simple marginal number of film studios or content creators actually creating content for these devices. And at the end of the day, the reality is that with all this proliferation of 4K and Ultra HD and that stuff, is that creating advertising content is going to become more expensive, right? Because a lot of that 30-second or 15-second creative that's for the first screen or for television is used derivatively online. The costs of content creation are just getting more expensive, and that does have a meaningful impact to our industry. Number five, strange bedfellows are coming together, right? I mean, this announcement with Ford and Amazon's Echo, right? The fact that we're bringing zero UI and cognitive kind of learning to the automobile, the auto is incredibly interesting, right? I think we're seeing companies coming together in this construct of what media is and what it means sort of, with Amazon kind of, coming into navigation and the in-vehicle entertainment system. That has incredible downstream effect, especially when advertising is a big revenue model for some of these guys that are providing this operating system or this in-vehicle experience. So we'll see what happens and what that means for the TV. Number six, some sleepers, right? In our industry and media, remember my old hat is manufacturing and sort of, components and stuff. But those of us in media, not a lot of people know this company called Qualcomm, right? Well, we should, because they're on almost every mobile device on the planet, especially in the US. So Qualcomm announced a partnership with Audi, specifically around their new Snapdragon processor, which is super interesting. It's going to power the navigation entertainment system in Audi vehicles. But what's really interesting for us is that they're also going to bring LTE to the automobile. So if you look at it from the perspective of multitasking, all of a sudden now if you have a high-speed, wireless connection in the automobile, what does that allow for multitasking? What does that allow for content consumption, especially if you parse that hard drive of the front seat navigation system and entertainment versus the back seat where the kids are, the rest, or the passengers are. But the long tail, what I'm foreshadowing, is that bringing LTE inherent to the car as part of the car's OS, if you will, or the system, the the entertainment system, all of a sudden now you have a relevant and meaningful value proposition for driverless vehicles. I mean, they're kind of a weird like luxury, but all of a sudden now if you can actually be on your laptop because you have a high-speed data connection, you can be multitasking, you can be Skyping in the car, or you can be watching a movie, it's much more meaningful if someone else or some invisible sort of Amazon Echo-like being that sits behind the box is actually driving it for you. Number 7. Internet of Things, et cetera. It's really about the Internet of Health. I mean, so Under Armour announced this partnership with HTC where they're picking up from where they failed the first time around and others have failed like Apple. And they've actually launched a full health sort of ecosystem called HealthBox, right? We saw Casio launch a smart outdoor sort of rugged watch rather. And then Fitbit launched the Blaze, which is a larger, sort of smarter device. I mean, all the wearables for sort of rugged outdoor fitness use are still kind of ugly, but at the end of the day, you know, we're creating an ecosystem, and that's really what's been missing, is that we've only maybe had an app that we can tether to an iOS device, but the idea of really being able to truly connect devices and make this the Internet of Health, whether it's the scale, the refrigerator, the microwave, and the oven, as well as then, you know, your mobile device and your wearable, that's where it starts to become meaningful, and we start to see a real change in user behavior or consumer behavior, how they buy, how they shop, and how they live. Can we just also give a shout out to the Chinese? Like, it was Hua that actually made wearables sexy. They have a partnership with Swartz Crystal, and they launched these 2 new devices this year that are super sexy. Like, first smart wearable device watch I would wear. It's pretty, and I think we got to give the Chinese some credit for that. Number 8, drones. So Ford's announced they're building a drone, right? And also sort of similar to that, just kind of investments in GM as well announced earlier this week their $500 million investment in Lyft. So all of a sudden now, you know, the automotive guys are getting in alternative transportation technologies or delivery technologies, if you will. I think that's relevant. But I think what's more important about drones is not that bigger guys are getting into it, because it's really just been a plethora of small startups that have been powering it, and international startups as well. Now the big guys are in, but also because of that, and we now have about 2 years under our belt of drones sort of being part of the conversation here. Now they're starting to be affordable, and there's a little bit more utility attached. It's not just the eccentric internet geek in New York, you know who you are, and I love you and your wife very much so, that sort of take their drone around the office and on tour. You know, actually the families can buy them now. They're becoming more affordable, and that's the overall theme, right? The same with 3D printing, the same with wearables, other things. The affordability is going to make these mass marketplace, which are much more relevant for media and advertising. 9, VR, virtual reality. I mean, it's still kind of weird. And if you put on the Oculus Rift, I still feel a little nauseous. But so, like, you know, I liken virtual reality to Google Glass, which kind of was virtual reality, right? The idea is that it's not scalable until we have a more meaningful way to make it wearable or usable. And I'm not really sure what the advertising play is. There are really interesting sort of unique ideas for shoppability and VR and, you know, in-store experience and try-ons and things like that. But are they scalable? And how, you know, how quickly is this technology really going to be adopted? And unless we address some of the issues around, you know, the physical impact you have when trying to use this hardware like Oculus, you know, it's not going to have the uptick that we want in the marketplace. And the last thing, which I think is really interesting, is personal transportation, right? Like the hoverboard was the talk of town between Justin Bieber and every other sort of 15-year-old or pubescent kid, you know, for the holiday season this year for gifts. We also have smart scooters, you know, that are big here at CES. I mean, awesome. It still doesn't want to make me clothesline adults that ride them on the sidewalk any less in New York City, but to each his own. So if you get there faster at your destination, as long as you're not hurting anybody, I'm still going to judge you. So CES was awesome this year. It was so great to be here. I love always being here with Beet, and we'll see you next year, probably also without a voice. Cheers.